You pull open the oven door in a southern kitchen and inhale. A whisper of cornmeal, butter sizzling at the edges. You break apart a golden slab. Crumbs fall, steam rises, and for a moment, there's nothing but that warm, gritty sweetness in your hand. But a moment later, on the same table, sits a stack of pillowy, flaky biscuits. Butter melts into its layers, a soft sigh as you tear it open. Two breads, two textures, two camps. And in the South, they've been waging a quiet war for centuries. Which side are you on, cornbread or biscuits? Welcome to True History in Minutes, where we uncover the fascinating stories behind the things you use every day. This is Cornbread versus Biscuits, the South's real bread battle. If you find this type of content valuable, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. It directly supports the growth of this channel. Over the next 10 minutes, we'll travel through time, tracing the roots of both breads, watching how culture and conflict shape them, and eventually, we'll land in modern kitchens to see who holds the throne today. So pour your sweet tea, butter up your bread of choice, and let's dig in. Cornbread didn't begin with a cookbook or a chimney. It was born of necessity. Long before European settlers arrived, indigenous peoples across North America were grinding maize into meal, forming simple breads, grits, and porridges. Corn was central to their diet. When settlers arrived, they borrowed those techniques, especially in places where wheat would not thrive. In colonial Virginia and the Carolinas, cornmeal became a lifeline. Wheat shipments were expensive, fields for growing wheat were limited, and southern soils or climates often foiled European grains. Corn was resilient. Thus, corn pone, ash cakes, hoe cakes emerged. Simple griddled or hearth breads made of cornmeal and water or milk, often cooked directly in embers or on flat irons. Meanwhile, biscuits arrived from a different lineage. The English term biscuit comes from biscoctus, twice baked. On ships or in the colonies, hard, dense biscuits, close to what we'd call crackers, were staples of long voyages. But the southern biscuit would become something else entirely. Soft, buttery, rising, once chemistry, baking powder, and soft wheat flour became available. In early southern households, beaten biscuits were common. These were labor-intensive. Dough was pounded 1,000 times by hand to develop structure, often by an enslaved child wielding a club or rolling pin. Those biscuits, though dense and crisp, were status symbols. Wheat and flour were luxuries. Cornmeal breads were the everyday staple. So from the start, cornbread was the bread of the many, biscuits, a specialty of the few. To understand why the bread battle matters, we must understand how food reflects identity, power, status, even race. In a region where resources were scarce, the ability to eat wheat-derived bread, or the kind of soft-risen biscuit, became a marker of prosperity. As historian Tony Tipton Martin puts it, biscuits have been a demarcation line in terms of class and race. In many black Southern kitchens, cornmeal was the foundation, not because they preferred it, but because flour was expensive or inaccessible. Cornmeal was abundant, adaptive, nourishing. In the 19th century, as leavening technologies improved, chemical agents like saleratus and baking soda became available. Then, in 1856, baking powder was patented, and biscuits, as we now recognize them, began their rise. Southern milling of soft winter wheat helped. That flour produced tender crumb rather than chewy loaf. Biscuits could finally be light, fluffy, and accessible. With that accessibility, biscuits became a vehicle for claiming social progress. To serve biscuits rather than corn pone was a way of signaling we've arrived. Yet, here's the twist, cornbread never surrendered. In poor rural kitchens, among sharecroppers, in black churches, in Appalachian valleys, cornbread remained the backbone of meals. The bread of resilience, not luxury. In some places, the divide was palpable. One food historian posed a playful but loaded question. Do you want the white answer or the black answer? When asked whether sugar belongs in cornbread, White Southern breads tend to lean sweet, northernizing cornbread into cakes. But in many African American traditions, cornbread remained savory, plain, and utilitarian. Even during the Civil War, cornbread adapted. Soldiers made sloosh, a dough of cornmeal and bacon grease wrapped around a ramrod and cooked over embers. It was crude, but it sustained. So the cornbread versus biscuits question is never just culinary, it's historical, cultural, emotional. Now let's talk about what really matters when the food hits your tongue. Cornbread in its southern form is dense and rustic. It's built around cornmeal, perhaps with a little flour or none at all. The texture is coarse, gritty, but that grit is part of the charm. Crumble it, let it soak up gravy, or eat it with butter and molasses. It usually has no sugar, allowing the natural corn flavor to speak. A crisp crust from cooking in a preheated cast iron skillet contrasts with a moist interior. The crust is key. A hot skillet ensures those edges brown and crisp, adding complexity and contrast. In contrast, a well-made Southern biscuit is all about layers and tenderness. Flour, fat, butter or lard, and buttermilk, or milk with acid, are coaxed into flakiness by cutting in cold fat, folding, and minimal handling. When baked, each biscuit's layers puff, separate slightly, and yield a light interior that collapses beautifully under butter. The contrast is nearly poetic. Cornbread, bold, grounding, hearty. Biscuit, ethereal, delicate, indulgent. Your preference might even shift depending on the meal. Cornbread with beans or greens, biscuits with sausage gravy or breakfast. Folks often debate, when you crumble cornbread into milk, is that sacrilege? And if a biscuit is too dense, is it even a biscuit? Those debates slosh into regional blogs, social media, and supper tables to this day. In the 20th and 21st centuries, both breads have been reinvented, commercialized, celebrated, and contested. Biscuits entered mass culture via fast food. In 1977, Bojangles opened its first location in Charlotte, NC, featuring fried chicken and biscuits, and now has hundreds of locations. The same year, Hardee's added sausage and biscuit breakfasts, launching a national biscuit boom. Biscuit and canned biscuit dough made biscuits accessible even outside the South. A Pullman cook's use of premixed biscuits reportedly inspired the product's invention. Cornbread also got new life. The National Cornbread Festival in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, gathers cornbread lovers annually for cook-offs, tastings, and contests. Chefs began riffing. Cornbread with jalapenos, cheddar, creamed corn. Some versions incorporate sugar or molasses to bridge toward sweet breads, blurring lines. In fine dining Southern kitchens, chefs may serve a biscuit cornbread, a hybrid that uses both cornmeal and flour to get some of both worlds. Some even do a layered cornbread biscuit mashup. Yet, controversies persist. Purists scorn sugar in cornbread. Some maintain that butter and layers corrupt the simplicity of a true biscuit. On forums, Reddit users debate passionately. Cornbread, on the other hand, is trash. Crumbly, grainy, strong cornmeal aftertaste. Why is all the cornbread in the North sweet? That isn't cornbread. The sweet versus savory argument is one of the oldest fractures in the bread battle. Even today, in kitchens across the South, from grand plantation homes to humble church potlucks, one hears whispers. Pass the cornbread, not the biscuit, or the reverse. It's less a feud, more love expressed through conviction. So where do we land? Is there a winner in the cornbread versus biscuits war? Maybe the point isn't to crown a champion, but to appreciate their coexistence. Cornbread represents heritage, grit, survival, rooted in Indigenous and African American traditions of making something nourishing from minimal resources. Biscuits represent aspiration, refinement, the marvel of chemistry and milling, the ideal of layering and indulgence. If forced to choose, I'd lean toward the biscuit for breakfast, the cornbread for dinner, but the real magic happens when both share the table. Here's your challenge. Next time you envision bread in a Southern meal, serve both. Let your guests debate, crumble cornbread into milk or soup, butter a biscuit until it sighs, spark that conversation we just had in your kitchen. If you enjoyed this dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for true history in minutes. Drop a comment. Which side are you on? Cornbread, biscuit, or both? And tell me your go-to recipe. Until next time, may your crumbs be generous and your layers lofty.